This is Jill.
And this is...
And you're listening to Scream Girl Squad.
Ooh. All right.
I don't know how I did that without laughing.
I am obsessed with that sound.
You did it so good.
I'm so happy that they used it so much in this movie.
Oh my gosh, so much in this movie.
Yeah. Which, this movie snuck by us. I mean, it's 5 years old? Is it 2020 right now? Am I still in the know about that?
When was it made?
2015.
Yeah, 5 years old. How did we miss it?
I have no idea.
What was going on in my life 5 years ago?
It was very sneaky, Final Girls. Especially because I love so many people that are in this movie.
Everyone in this movie is amazing.
Yeah. A lot of the horror films we've been watching lately either, are the kind that we wanted to see in theaters and have a very recognizable cast, or they're ones that snuck by us and we have no idea who on earth any of these people are.
Yeah.
But this one...
snuck by us,
yeah,
and we know everyone.
Pretty much.
I don't understand.
How did you say you found this?
Amazon recommended it to me because I watched Ready or Not.
Excellent.
Which I can put those two in the same classification in my head.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
They're both horror comedies that strike a really good balance.
Yep.
And are both, quite frankly, amazing.
Yep.
Yeah. Super well made.
Yeah, for sure. I enjoyed them both immensely.
I can glow about this movie for a while.
I can't stop smiling.
Yeah. I know. I'm joyous right now.
Yes,
from this
I
film.
needed a good, happy movie, and this hit the spot.
You wouldn't think a slasher would, really put you in a good mood.
You say that, but slashers do put me... They're my favorite type of horror movie. Just because of, the predictability and the ridiculousness, and... they never take themselves too seriously, and I love that. So
I'll say that's when they work, is when they're like Scream, and they're not going for serious, they're going for entertaining.
Yes. But I feel like even Halloween, even the first one, they tried to make it serious, but it didn't work, and that's what I like about it. So, yeah.
Well, it was the 70s.
It's true. But, yeah, I love me a good slasher movie.
Yeah. So this hit the spot. Much more than our pizza that was supposed to have double mushrooms and had...
my slice had one mushroom on it.
I'm going to be salty about this for days.
You should, because we wanted friggin' mushroom pizza.
Yeah. I wanted it to be almost disgustingly laden with mushrooms. Where you try to pick up a slice and they fall off.
Yeah. Have a little pizza with your mushrooms. That's what I wanted.
Yes.
Nope.
And...
we were failed.
It'll also teach me a valuable lesson about, looking in the box before you leave the store. I know, and then we were in the car. It's a lot of work. So much work. And I was starving by that point.
I know.
Starving at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Like the old woman that I have become.
Yep. If I don't eat by 5:30, I get cranky.
Let's all blame intermittent fasting for turning us into old people.
Sure. That's a thing I've ever done.
So, the pizza was bad, the movie was great.
Yes.
It's a balanced world. For those of you like us that Final Girls snuck by or flew under the radar, the general premise of the film is that a group of college students, I guess I would peg them as... There was a mention of finishing school.
High school?
No way.
Yeah, because the one girl was talking about how I'm going to get into Harvard and blah, blah, blah.
Oh, I missed that part.
Yeah.
Oh, high school, really? Okay, so, all right. So we should say, this is a horror comedy. They made a really great slasher movie, but they made it completely spoofing every other slasher movie.
Completely.
So it makes sense to me that I am very dubious about these actors being high school age, because in Scream, everyone's supposed to be in high school, and
they're
no one in that
32.
film. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they must have
watching
purposely done
90210.
the same thing. Yeah. So yeah, there's a group of young people, I guess. And they get trapped inside of a classic fake slasher movie from the 80s called Camp Bloodbath.
That's what I'm like.
I really struggled to remember. Camp Bloodbath.
Yes, Camp Bloodbath, because the super fans are called Bathmaticians.
That's how I remember it, because I wrote down Bathmaticians. Okay.
Me too.
So there's a 20th anniversary screening of this classic horror movie called Camp Bloodbath. And it's become a cult classic, and everyone adores it. Mm-hmm. And this group of kids gets trapped inside of the movie and basically has to figure their way out of the movie, figure out how to survive. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing.
It's so amazing.
It's so, so good, because in addition to completely skewering every slasher movie, but in a totally loving way, mm-hmm. it was solidly constructed. There was a really great sort of, not quite subplot, it was more like a parallel plot.
Yeah.
About grief and loss and love and all of these wonderful little emotional scenes. It was so good.
It was just really, really, really well done. And the comedic timing was perfect.
Oh, so good.
I almost spit soda out my nose several times. Mm-hmm. So it was good.
Yeah, we had that kind of awful explosive laughter that you have when something's really funny. I call it my Mrs. Krabappel laugh when something really gets me and I'm just sort of like, ha!
The kind of laugh that we do the same. So,
yes.
Yeah, that.
We love it so much that we're totally getting ahead of our own format and we're
just talking about the movie.
Yeah, we're just rating it.
So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we like to rate movies on 2 different scales. We like to rate it on enjoyability, which we base on some sort of snack, because we're munch mouths.
Munch mouths.
And then we rate it on fright factor, which we base off of something scary from the movie. So Corinne, 1 to 5 peanut butter eggs. How much did you enjoy this movie?
This movie was great. Mm-hmm. I was totally prepped to give it a solid and firm 5 because I loved it. I'm going to watch it every year.
Yep.
It's amazing.
Yep.
But I have to subtract an entire star because for the entire climax, like at least 10 minutes, if not 15, they have this fake lightning going on in the background that was too close to strobing.
Awful.
It was awful. It made it so I couldn't even really watch a big chunk of it. So -1 star because Jill had to narrate the climax for me.
Well, and I ended up closing my eyes halfway through it too.
Yeah.
And strobing doesn't even bother me, but it was so much that it was like giving me a headache.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I have to say 4 stars just for that whole flashy bit.
Yeah.
That's it.
We'll talk about it. But
yeah, the stuff happening during the flashy bit was amazing, but the flashy was so much that I didn't even care.
It totally took away from it.
Yep.
Yeah. We'll talk more about that in the spoilers section.
Yes. So, fright factor, scale of 1 to 5, machete-wielding men.
Uh-huh.
How scared were you?
1? Maybe. They were definitely more focused on lovingly mocking slasher films than making a slasher film.
I do not think they were trying to scare us.
No.
For sure.
But there was one scene that we'll get into that they did such a good job building tension. Mm-hmm. And then another similar scene, like 2/3 of the way through the movie, when they set out to make a scary scene, they actually pulled it off. Mm-hmm. It's just that they only did that maybe twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 1 machete-wielding man. I think that's fair.
So, Joe?
Hey, he had his shirt on, so.
That's true. The person in this film that wields a machete was wearing a shirt, unlike our friend Joe, who's incapable of doing that while he has a machete in his hand.
He's just incapable of wearing a shirt. Let's just be honest about that.
He's like Tim Allen.
Excuse. He's the girl in this movie.
Okay, we'll talk about Joe's cameo appearance in the film. Awesome. Well,
anyway,
I have so many good things to say about this movie. And warning, our notes were super sparse because
we were enjoying it too much to write things down. And honestly, there wasn't a lot to write down because usually we're trying to like keep up with the plot or write down things that we remember. Anyway, things like that. And this movie was just there was so much. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, kind of a simple plot. I didn't feel like I needed to take a lot of notes, but I feel like if we just talk about it, that will be better.
Totally.
So.
Yeah, the stuff I was writing down were mostly just hilarious quotes that I wanted to make sure that we mention. And it's not like there's some deep mystery to solve the way that there is the hole in the ground or something like that.
Right. A general overview for this movie will work just splendidly without us having to remember every little detail.
Yeah.
So.
But for sure, if you haven't watched it,
watch it.
Yeah, watch it. It's PG-13. It's been out for 5 years, so it's definitely going to be available to rent at Top Hat or online. And it is so worth watching. And I'm happy they gave it a PG-13 rating because I think it makes it pretty accessible.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All my girls listening to this that ask me every week, will I like this movie? Yes, you will. So we will be having a movie night.
Yes.
I think even Danielle would like this movie, so.
Oh, yeah, I think she would too.
Yep.
And it's also one of those movies that's so good it inspires you to make movies of your own.
It is definitely the kind of movie you always wanted to make.
Yeah.
So.
100%. Yeah. But they did it way better than I ever could.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and get our hands dirty and start tearing this puppy apart.
All right.
No, I don't like that. I came out of my mouth and I was like,
get the image out of my head.
I'm too imaginative. It's painful. Let's get our hands dirty and, do the thing. I was just trying to avoid saying dive right in, because we always say dive right in, but apparently I can't be trusted to say anything else without it being horrifying, so
let's do this thing. There you go.
Do this thing. All right.
Spoilers. I'm pretty sure you've said that phrase numerous times, and I've never even thought about it. Just for the record.
So today is the first time that my brain caught what I've been saying.
Yep.
Right out of the gate, they did this amazing thing with the production company logos at the beginning, because they did a couple logos that I assume were real. That were the real things. I haven't looked it up for when we post the episode yet, but then they did one that I'm pretty sure is fake, or they did a real production company logo, but they made it look super similar to ones I remember seeing in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And they wobbled the film a little bit. They just did this effect that made it look like, okay, now you're watching something on VHS that came out 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm. They did a really good job of making things look like it was in the 80s.
Oh, totally.
And it was magical. But like modern 80s, if that makes any sort of sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, it worked really well. So it starts out, it kind of blends you into this trailer for... What is it called again?
Camp Bloodbath.
Camp Bloodbath. That just from the get-go, Corinne and I were like, if the whole movie is like this, we are going to love this movie.
Yes.
And so the trailer is just campy and ridiculous. Everything is a crazy pun.
It was so cliche.
Like so cliche.
The VW van pulling into the camp and the girl leaning out the window and screaming, "Best summer ever!"
Yes.
Yeah.
And it showed, like people getting slashed and the killer standing in the rain with holding his machete.
And he's wearing a wood carved version of a Jason Voorhees mask from Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
You could tell that that's the movie that Camp Bloodbath is mocking.
Absolutely. But it was like a silly hand carved out of wood. I think it had a mustache. Sort of mask happening that was just perfect for what this movie is. And right off the bat, I knew I was going to love this movie because in the trailer you get to see Adam Devine, who we all fell in love with in Pitch Perfect.
Mm-hmm. Or if you watched Workaholics.
Yeah, he's just fantastic.
I just realized none of my favorite quotes from Workaholics are things that we can say on this podcast.
Yep.
He's pretty much, I think, the star of the movie within a movie cast.
Yes, I think so too. Other than, who's the blonde woman?
Malin
Ackerman. She's been in tons of stuff. Anyway, so they watched the whole trailer for this slasher movie that looks amazing, and I'm really sad it's not a real movie. And so then it zooms out, the girl watching it is a young girl sitting in a car by herself, and she's watching the trailer on her cell phone. Mm-hmm. And it's Tessa Farmiga, who we love from The Nun. Mm-hmm. We went to see The Nun. That's what I know her from. You knew her from other things, though, right? Or is that it?
Pretty much The Nun. Well, and she's Vera Farmiga's little sister. Yeah. She's been in a bunch of stuff, but...
She's just sitting in the car all by herself. And then her mom gets in the car with her, and she's clearly been at an audition. And she's the blonde woman from the slasher movie. Mm-hmm. And she immediately says, I walked in, and he said, where do I know you from? And I started listing off these things that I've been in. And then he's like, oh, no, you were in Bloodbath. Or Camp Bloodbath. I love the stuff
that she lists off, too. Because she's like, oh, well, I was in that arc on CSI.
Where I played a bipolar woman. He's like, no, that's not it.
And I love that because I swear 80% of the people that you look up on IMDb have either had an arc on CSI or NCIS or Law and Order.
Yep.
Or one of your medical shows.
Yep.
Yep.
Very true. Law and Order SVU is filmed in New York, so a lot of Broadway people are on it.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. See, Law and Order is too easy because you're like, oh, I know him, so he's the rapist.
Right. Is that Dean Cain?
Exactly.
When we were podcasting, we didn't talk about John Mulaney. So.
It's true. Well, when you were telling me earlier about that Love at First Sight TV show on Netflix, all I could think about was the John Mulaney fake movie idea for the people that got what's-his-face's eyes.
Jerry Orbach's eyes.
Jerry Orbach's
This
eyes.
year, love is spelled with 2 eyes.
Okay, back on task.
Anywho, so they're in the car. Mom didn't get the part. She just talks about how she wants to be a movie star. The daughter is clearly the responsible one. She's like, but how are we going to pay the electric bill? So mom throws it out the car window. It's a woman after my own heart. But they clearly are a very close mother and daughter pair.
Yes.
Betty Davis Eyes comes on. And the mom's like, hey, it's our song. And they start like singing and dancing together.
It's so cute.
So cute.
Their emotional connection right away is so strong and felt so genuine.
For sure.
And then the daughter spills her coffee on the mom's headshots that have her resume on the back, the actor headshots. Mm-hmm. And her mom's like, those are so expensive to make. And then, bam, their car gets hit by another car. And rolls a whole bunch of times. And I have to say, this is one of those rare times where I didn't see the car accident coming. Did you see it coming?
I did.
Oh, man. Maybe
but I read the plot of the movie.
Oh.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, for lazy people like Corinne who didn't read the plot of the movie, sometimes you can tell it's coming because they'll have those shots where it's sort of tracking them and you can see things passing through the side window for too long and you just start feeling it. Mm-hmm. And it happens so much that whenever I'm watching Mindhunter and they're talking to each other in the car, I'm on edge the whole time because I'm expecting them to get hit by a semi. Yes. But in this one, they didn't establish it for too long, so it worked.
It really, and it surprised me too. And I knew that the mom was going to die, but I thought they were setting up, here's the relationship, and then they were going to show something later. Like, I didn't think it was going to happen then. Yeah. So I think Corinne and I both jumped and screamed a little. Not screamed a little, but I went,
yeah.
You know, anyway. What is that called? Gasp. I gasped.
Oh, words.
Words.
So the car rolls a bunch of times, which I read later was all CGI.
But it didn't look that way.
Yeah. Probably if we watch this movie in another 5 years, we'll be like, that looked really bad.
Terrible. Yeah, but it looked good.
It held up for at least 5 years, so that's more than I can say for a lot of other movies. Then, 3 years later, the girl, whose name is Max, played by Tessa Farmiga, she wakes up, and she's watching a home video of her and her mom, and she's saying, coming, Aunt whoever. So they set up really quickly that the mom died in that car accident.
So she heads out. She goes to meet her best friend at a diner. And her best friend is played by...
She's played by Maybe from Arrested Development, who is amazing.
She is amazing. And they clearly are like really tight and really good friends. They have this great banter. Mm-hmm. I tend to judge things like that off Corinne and I's relationship, and it held.
Yeah, it felt genuine.
Yeah, it was good. There's also a very handsome blonde gentleman sitting there. So his name is Chris, and he is clearly completely smitten with Max.
Mm-hmm. And he is played by Alexander Ludwig from The Hunger Games.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I only know him from The Hunger Games, where he kind of just played one of the career tributes, as they call them. And he didn't really get a lot of screen time or anything. Yeah. So I was just kind of like, oh, it's that Hunger Games guy, but I don't...
He's tall and handsome.
Yeah. Tall, handsome, ripped, you know.
Yeah.
Usual leading man style. So, yeah, he's totally flirting with Max. He clearly really likes her. I think he's trying to ask her out, or does he ask her out before? I think he just is trying to butter her up at that point.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of just him screen time before arguably the best character in the whole movie walked in.
Indeed. Yeah. So in walks the best character of the whole movie.
His name is Duncan.
Duncan.
And he's played by Thomas Middleditch, who is hilarious. If you've seen him in Silicon Valley.
I forgot I was going to look him up because I know him, but I didn't watch Silicon Valley. Oh, he was in the new Godzilla movie.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. He's in the new Zombieland, which I haven't seen.
The new Zombieland is so good. I totally forgot he's in it. He plays like Jesse Eisenberg's mirror in that movie.
Gosh. I want to see it so bad. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, that one is amazing. So he walks in, and Duncan is a super horror movie nerd. He is the one that lets us know that fans of Camp Bloodbath are called Bathmaticians.
Mm-hmm.
That's
which
the
is
fan
just
name they
amazing.
themselves.
We immediately went, yes, Bathmatician.
I
consider myself Bathmatician now. So he's like, assistant manager at a movie theater, and so he's like, hey, and like slips Max a flyer, and she's like, no.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I need you to come, I promise, please. And so he tells them they're having this screening, and he got all this cred for saying he could get the daughter of the star. Yeah. And so he's like, when I told everyone that you're my sister's best friend, and his sister jumps in, she's like, well, stepsister. And he's like, wow, why'd you have to go there? That's hurtful.
He's like, when my dad told me I was getting a sister, I cried because that's all I've ever wanted. And you're just like this all the time.
And it was amazing. The brother-sister banter was perfect. So he talks her into it.
He bribes her.
Yes. He says, I'll do your homework. I know you're failing. And she's like, fine. So then they go to the movie theater, and Chris shows up, and he's like, hey, I thought you could use moral support because it's the anniversary of her mom's death.
Yeah.
And she's like swooning. No, I can't believe you're here. And then his ex-girlfriend rolls up.
And she is played by Nina Dobrev,
who I love/hate.
She's from The Vampire Diaries. And before that, she was on Degrassi.
Corinne and I have been rewatching.
Yes.
So
I just barely saw her.
I think we've talked about it on this show before.
Probably. It's a big part of our lives right now. It comes up a lot.
Yes.
But
yeah, I think she's most famous for playing Elena on The Vampire Diaries. Mm-hmm. So
who's a very serious character, very like melodramatically serious.
She plays way more of a Max character. So then instead, she is this whole other kind of awesome character who's just like loud and obnoxious and totally bratty and like a show off and look at me
and
sort
no boundaries.
Person. No boundaries. And she was amazing, and I loved it so much.
She had so many good lines. She pulls up in an SUV with some guy whose name you don't have to remember.
Yeah.
And she's leaning out the window like, oh, hey, you guys are here at the screening? What a coincidence. He also wanted to come, and I was like, oh, whatever, but I guess we're here now.
And the dude's just sitting there, like, silent, kind of looking at her like, what? And her ex-boyfriend, Chris, is like, oh, really? You didn't see my post about it? And she's like, no. She's like, I don't even follow your Twitter, which lost 3 followers today, by the way. So she's clearly stalking her ex-boyfriend. She's definitely moved on.
Well, she's a jealous type, too. Once they're in the theater at the concessions area, and she can definitely tell that Max the main character and Chris have a little bit of a budding romance. They have some chemistry, and she's immediately jealous. So when Chris offers to buy Max some popcorn and put M&Ms in it and stuff like that, Nina Dobreau's character is like, oh, and don't forget, also, I would like a child-sized popcorn, and be sure to throw half of it in the garbage, and I better just
You
come
remember
with you.
how I like it, right? I better just come with you. Like,
Everything
she's
out of her
very
mouth was
demanding.
amazing.
And while they're standing there is when she's like, oh, yeah, I'm probably going to go to Harvard and blah, 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 and talking about how smart and amazing she is. Like, she clearly, we all know someone like that who's more amazing than real life and has to tell you about it, right? Yep.
I was probably distracted at that point thinking about M&Ms and popcorn and how I've never done that before and I would like to.
I would not, because I don't like melty things.
I don't like the idea of it being melty, but I love trail mix, especially when the peanut salt gets on the M&Ms and the raisins, so then they're all sweet and salty.
Yeah.
But I hate peanuts. So
I might like M&Ms and popcorn better than, there's this terrible movie where Katie Holmes is the president's daughter, and they put Junior Mints in the popcorn.
Ew, mint and
that
salty?
just
No.
seems so much worse.
No, that sounds
M&Ms
terrible.
I feel like would be better.
Yeah.
So, because like, have you ever had chocolate popcorn? Yeah. Like, you
Yes,
just drizzle
exactly.
it. That would be good. So, you've sold me.
Okay.
We can try it next week.
We'll try that next time. Well, Kelly and I this Friday for our date, we're going to go to the movie theater and we're going to get a bucket of popcorn and then we're going to come home and watch The Lord of the Rings.
Rachel and I did that all the time last year when we had a bucket for popcorn. So no judgment here.
Yep. So we're definitely going to also put M&Ms in it, I have decided.
Yep. Good plan.
Anyway, they're at the movie theater. Thomas Middleditch's character, Duncan, is hilarious. He trips over one of those velvet rope things.
He does this thing where he tries to, like, you know, exit the scene and kind of jumps back and trips over, like, the velvet rope divider thing. And the trivia said that it was on accident the first time, and then they kept it in, which I'm really glad because it was amazing. And
apparently a lot of this movie was improvised like that, especially his dialogue.
They kind of let him and Adam Devine, for sure, just kind of go nuts, and it worked really well.
So everyone eventually gets settled in the theater, and they're watching this hilariously epic and terrible movie. And a couple things that happen on screen happen simultaneously in the theater. Like, someone on screen lights something with a Zippo lighter, and a guy in the theater lights a cigarette with a Zippo lighter. Somebody has a bottle of liquor, and it falls out of their hands and rolls all the way down underneath everyone's seats and lands by the curtains. And a lot of the camera work in this movie was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Just a lot of fun. You could tell they had a lot of rigged things and stuff like that. But this scene gave me a little bit of anxiety. And I told Jill I'm going to be worried about this every time I'm in the movie theater now. Because, of course, Final Destination style, like, the spilled liquor manages to get all over the theater. And then the guy who had lit his cigarette
has, like, ashes fall that then catch the liquor on fire, and the whole place goes up in flames.
Yeah. Immediately, too.
Immediately.
Like, flames on all sides. Everyone is screaming.
So Max and her whole group are sitting on the very front row, and they immediately are like, all the exits are blocked. What are we going to do? And for some reason, there's a machete on the ground.
That someone dropped. They brought it as a prop,
I guess.
Like when you go see Rocky Horror.
It was sharp enough that she picked it up. Machete. Max picked it up and used it to slice the movie screen. And it kind of lit up from behind, which I would think would happen.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And she slashes down at the exact same time that Billy Murphy, the slasher from the film itself, he's slashing down. So it's another real life meets art at the same moment.
Yes. And they all go through the cut in the movie screen, and it all kind of blacks out.
Yeah.
So then they wake up, and it sort of reminds me of that episode of Family Guy where they wake up in the, Brian and Stewie wake up in the Disney movie, and everything's a little too happy and bright and sunshiny and flowers.
Yeah.
And
there was like a suspicious number of wildflowers around them in this like random forest.
Yes, which I read in the trivia. It said they wanted him to wake up in a Technicolor world, and so they had made all these fake flowers to make it look all Technicolor, which would be like Wizard of Oz when she wakes up in the Technicolor, all the fake flowers, so it kind of worked for me because of that.
Yeah.
Which was fun.
Yeah, it did feel kind of like Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. So she wakes up, she's in the middle of the woods, and then her friends start coming out of the bushes, and they're all, hilariously, what does Poison Ivy look like? Does this look like Poison Ivy to you?
A couple seconds later, the VW bus from the preview and from the movie itself pulls up and stops next to them. And this character, Tina, leans out. And Thomas Middleditch is like, oh my god, it's Tina. And then he covers
and she's like, yeah, that's me.
He covers his mouth, but his mouth is like working behind his hands.
Yeah.
It just looked so...
It was like when you're really excited and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Hey.
It was so cute. So they figure out pretty quickly that they are somehow in the movie.
And the van rolls up and they're like, hey, do you guys know where Camp blah, blah, blah is? Camp Bloodbath? That's not what it's called. What is
Camp
it?
Bluefinch?
Bluefinch? I think it is Bluefinch. Do you know where Camp Bluefinch is? And they're like, no. And they're like, okay then, bye. And just kind of drive away. And they sit down and exactly 92 minutes later, the van rolls up again and they say the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And they go, yeah, just continue down this road. And they're like, okay, thanks, bye. And then nothing else happens. So then 92 minutes later, they come back again. And this time they're like, yeah, we know where it is. We can show you.
If you give us a ride.
If you give us a ride. And they're like, sure, hop on in. And they all get in the van. And Max gets to see her mom in the back of the van.
Which immediately brings her to tears.
Which I thought was a little interesting that she hadn't put it together yet, that her mom was going to be in the back of the van.
Yeah. It made me wonder.
They just watched that part of the movie.
Yeah.
So I don't know if she just assumed her mom wouldn't be there, but I don't know why she would. Anyway, that was a little mysterious to me because she seemed surprised.
Yeah. And maybe it just surprised her to see her mom so much younger than she'd ever seen her in life, I guess.
Maybe.
But
I don't know. Anyway,
she's crying. It's very sweet.
It was very sweet. So they all get to camp, and they all kind of are just talking to the characters. And Max is talking to her mom and says, whatever you do, keep your shorts on. Like, don't have sex with anyone.
Yeah.
This movie is a lot like Jason Voorhees in the Friday the 13th movie. Anyone who has sex gets killed. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much the basis of this movie. If you have sex, you're going to die.
It's the classic slasher movie rules.
Yes. Yeah. So, except drinking apparently was not part of that for this one. But if you have sex, you're going to die. So she's like, you have to keep your clothes on. You have to, and the girl's like, her mom's just kind of like, okay, whatever. Like she thinks she's crazy. And at the same time, Adam Devine is off like hitting on everybody and talking about what a study is and just being generally ridiculous and amazing.
And Duncan, Thomas Middleditch's character, is baiting him into like, oh, give me a zinger, just zing me. And Adam Devine's character calls him like a turd sandwich or something like
something terrible.
Yeah, just something terrible. And Thomas Middleditch is like, oh my gosh, the dialogue is so bad.
And Adam Devine is just like, what? So then everyone else is like, hey, give us the keys to your van. And he's like, nope. And throws him into the woods.
To be a jerk, yeah.
To be a jerk. So he's like, you can go find him and then you can have my van, and like throws him into the woods. And that's pretty much where we left that, right?
Yeah. Like, so all of the intruders in this horror movie, which again are Max, the main character, her pseudo-boyfriend Chris, her best friend Gertie, played by Maybe from Arrested Development, Thomas Middleditch, and Nina Dobrev's character, who's insane and mean and hilarious. So those five go into the woods to find the keys because they're thinking, well, if we get the van, we can drive ourselves back to reality, I guess. Mm-hmm. So they're looking for it, and they realize that they're in the woods at the same time as this famous scene in the movie where one of the other camp counselors meets a handsome hiker and immediately gets murdered by Billy Murphy, the masked machete guy.
Yeah. So they're all in the woods looking for the keys, and they all like sneak up behind a log, Jurassic Park style. and start peeking over to watch this scene. And then they all start freaking out. Hold on. I don't want to watch anyone die.
Yeah.
And Thomas Middleditch, he's like, no, it's going to be awesome. Like, he is here for it. He is so jazzed about this for some reason.
He's a super fan.
He's a super fan. He is a mathematician. So they're totally watching this whole scene play out. And then he kills them both, the couple that met up in the woods. And then he's just standing there staring at everyone else behind the log. And they're all like, what's happening? And kind of freaked out. And Thomas Middleditch kind of walks towards him and he's like, this is amazing. And starts talking about, he's like, the way we're going to get through this is if we survive. Yeah. Like, we have to get the final girl, whose name is
Paula.
So we have to find the final girl. And if we just stick with her, she survives, we'll survive. It'll all be great. We just have to survive this movie.
Yeah.
And then he
spoils the ending and describes
how Paula kills the guy in front of the guy.
Very excitedly, yeah.
Yeah, and he's like really happy about it. Then all of a sudden he remembers he's just standing behind him and turns around and gets scared. And like, he does scared really well. He went from like hilarious to terrified really well. And Billy kind of is just staring at him and then just walks away. And he's like, oh my gosh, that was so scary. I totally thought he was going to kill me. I almost peed myself. And his sister's like, you did pee yourself. And he's like, oh my gosh, I did. And he's like laughing. And then a machete flies through the air and stabs him.
It like cuts deep into his side.
Yeah.
So this scene earned a half a star of Fright Factor for me, because the tension while Billy Murphy is standing behind Thomas Middleditch and you're wondering, is he going to kill him? Is he not going to kill him?
Especially when he starts walking closer towards him and he's like right up behind him and you see his face turn to terror. You're like, oh no.
So that scene was super
really well done. Yeah. So he gets stabbed and they all are freaking out and run off. Because at this point, they're like, oh, crap, we thought we couldn't die. We can. Now what?
So they run out of the woods, and they're running back towards the main cabin, and they kind of run past the main cabin.
Oh my gosh, this scene was so amazing.
It was so well done. They had the camera on. It was like
they're trying to run out of camp.
Yes.
Yes.
And the camera was on something that I'm sure there's some type of special term for this, but picture a lazy Susan with a camera on it that just like is spinning around. So they would run out of the woods and past the camera and off to the other side. And
then out of the woods again.
Yeah.
And past the camera. And every time they'd pass, they'd run by two of the characters who would say, where are they going? Or something. And then it would happen again.
Yep. Over and over.
And again, and finally they were like, we can't leave this camp!
Yep. So this is when they figure out, okay, it's not just the murderous guy with the machete. The other thing we have to contend with is that the movie won't let us leave. Mm-hmm. And the only way we're going to survive is to survive the movie. Yes. And make it to the credits.
Yes. So, so they decide to split up. They're all going to team up with someone in the movie and keep them alive and stick with them and keep them out of each other's pants and all of those kinds of things. So Max obviously takes her mom. Chris takes Adam Devine, who then they have this hilarious conversation where Adam Devine is reading a Playboy and he's like, you know, check out this woman, right? And Chris is like, yeah, but what about the articles and stuff? And, like, you can tell he's like, this is really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And yeah, they just have this really hilarious back and forth and just a great movie. And so then Max goes off with her mom.
Mm-hmm. And her friend Gertie goes off with a counselor named Blake. And the mean one, Nina Dobrev, she goes off with kind of the ditz of the camp counselors.
Yes.
Whose name is Tina. And Tina is amazing.
And they all say at the beginning, we have to get Tina to keep her clothes on. Because I guess in the movie she does this, like, infamous striptease situation.
And gets macheted right when she's showing off her assets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're like, we have to get her to keep her clothes on. And that proves to be difficult.
They put her in a gigantic life jacket, and then they tape oven mitts on her hands.
So she can't get her clothes off.
But she's trying to the whole time.
And it's so funny.
It's like she's been given a prime directive to expose herself and cannot function if she does anything else.
Yeah. Which is true to her movie character, so it fits. Yeah. And it's hilarious.
So they all pair off. Some hilarity ensues. Some sweetness also happens with Max talking to her mom and trying to protect her mom's virtue. Because apparently in the film, her mom loses her virginity and then gets murdered in a waterbed. Very 80s.
Yes. And that all starts to happen while Max is in the room. And she, is like, oh, what's happening?
Yeah, so Adam Devine's character comes upstairs to deflower Max's mom and does this really awkward pants half off. Not sexy at all little dance. And both Max and her mom are standing in the corner like, ah!
Max is standing between her mom and Adam Devine, protective style. And her mom's in the background ooh. Because he's supposed to be the stud of the movie, even though he's not.
So not, yeah.
Yeah.
So while they're upstairs, Billy, the murderer, is peeking in through the windows downstairs.
Yeah. Which makes the friend...
Yeah, Gertie, friend, played by...
scream at the top of her lungs. So they all go running down the stairs. And they hear, tires screeching. And the final girl shows up. And she looks amazing. She, rolls up in a muscle car of some kind. I think it's a T-Bird or something. Trans Am something. Anyway, she rolls up. And she's got a leather jacket on and sunglasses, and she just looks totally amazing. And she gets out of the car and they're all like, yay, she's here. And she comes in and Gertie's like, Max, you have to tell them about Billy. And the mom's like, Billy? You mean Billy from camp or whatever? And she's like, a long time ago. And everyone converges into a circle in the middle of the room.
This made me laugh
and
so
everyone
hard.
Is and the extra people, the friends from the real world, are all looking around at each other what's happening? And she starts telling the story and the ceiling starts dripping. And they're all like, what is happening? And it's like the movie is melting. And it melts away into a black and white movie screen for a flashback. And Gertie's like, am I colorblind? Am I having a stroke? And they're like, no, it's a flashback scene. And so they watch the whole flashback scene of Billy when he's at camp. And he's locked in an outhouse. And the counselors decide to throw firecrackers into the outhouse. He gets burned all over. So he carves a mask and kills everyone.
Yeah. So it's his big origin story.
And as it flashes around, they're standing in front of the outhouse where they put the firecrackers in. And then it shows him in the hospital bed. And they all just transport to the hospital bed. And they're all looking at each other
trying to figure out where they are.
What is happening right now? And then it flashes him again, or takes him again to a cabin where then they watch him stab people. And I think he stabs 9 people for every hour he was in the hospital or something. And they're all just standing there what is happening? And then the mom finishes telling the story and it starts dripping again and they come back to color. But while they were in the black and white scene, they're watching him stab all those people and Gertie gets splashed with blood. So then when they get transported back to the movie, to the color part of the movie, she is covered in blood. It is splattered everywhere. And everyone starts freaking out. Why are you covered in blood?
All of a sudden.
And they all start freaking out and running. And the final girl gets in her car with Adam Devine and they speed off. They're like, peace out, we're out of here. And they start driving away. And just then, the stepbrother stumbles out of the woods. And
he's like, yeah.
And he's like, hey, guess what? I'm not dead. And bam, gets hit by the car.
And then Paula, the final girl driving the car, she's so distracted that she slams into one of the posts that's holding up the Welcome to Camp Bluefinch sign.
Yeah.
And ejects Adam Devine out the windshield. And he lands on the road with his body folded in on itself.
It was really ridiculous.
And then everyone's shouting at Paula, get out of the car! And it just explodes for no reason the way the cars do in movies.
80s. Yeah. Yeah.
So they're both dead.
Yeah.
And suddenly there's no final girl to be had.
So then they're like, crap, what are we going to do? So they're all in the cabin trying to come up with a plan. They're like, okay, well, we need a new final girl. Like, there has to be a final girl. And Nina Dobrev's character stands up and she's like, well, I'll do it. I don't care. I'll kill him. And Chris is like, you can't. You're not a virgin. And she like tries to argue and she's like, well, technically. It's like this whole big deal. Anyway, they're like, what about you, Gertie? And she's like, no, I'm not either. Remember that guy from last summer or whatever? So, which I found weird that her best friend wouldn't know, but whatever. Anyway, so then they're like, Max, you have to do it. You're the only one. And she's like, I can't do it. She's too scared. Yeah. And then her mom steps up and she's like, well, hey, I'm a virgin. I can do it.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is an amazing plan. Except, oh no, Nina Dobrev's character is like, you can't do it. You're the boring girl with a clipboard. You're not supposed to live.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh. And then they're like, no, she can do it. She's going to do it. She's going to be the final girl. They all decide that they have to start fighting back.
And they pick this like iconic scene from the movie where there's a big slumber party that a bunch of people die at. And they say, which is also the slumber party where the Tina character takes off her shirt. So they decide they're going to set a trap for Billy and they're going to use Tina's shirtlessness as bait.
Which pretty much they're like, we're just going to take off her life vest and let her do her thing.
But she has to wait to take off her life vest until the trap has been set. So she's still going to be locked up in her little...
Which is hilarious.
Yeah.
But she has to be...
Restrained.
Yeah. So they get the trap all set. Nina Dobrev's character talked about earlier that she pops Adderall to get through the day.
Yeah.
And so Tina gets a hold of the pills. And she's like, I took like 10 or 30. And she's talking so fast. And she's so wired.
Yes.
She's all wired and ready to go. So they kind of just set her free. And they play some sort of 80s metal ballad. What was it? I can't remember. Was it Pour Some Sugar on Me?
She's my cherry pie.
She's my cherry pie. The other stripper anthem. So she starts dancing around this crazy dance.
It's so good.
It's so amazing. She's like crawling around on the floor. She's having a great time.
I didn't think anything could top the parking lot dancing in Hot Rod where they're all dancing by the van together. This topped it. It was fantastic.
Excellent. So you can like see Billy coming towards the cabin, and just to like cement it, she lifts up her top to flash him.
Mm-hmm. So she's got her shirt up and he's coming, and then she gets scared.
Oh, yeah.
And they're telling her, no, you have to stay where you are, stay where you are. And she's like, no, I'm scared. So she turns around to run away and accidentally trips one of the traps that they had set for him.
That's right.
And she trips over a wire and her face lands in a bear trap.
Yes.
And then they don't even have time to react to that because Billy walks into the cabin and they have to slam the door shut and hit him with like a giant log. It felt like Home Alone.
Yes. Like they hit him with this giant log that knocks him into the door full of antlers and he gets just kind of stuck there.
Yes. So right after they drop this big log that knocks him into the antlers, the friend Gertie and the counselor that she had paired up with, they turn to each other and they're like, I love you. And they kiss. And so you know immediately he is next to die. Yeah.
So that's how it works. Walks up to Billy and Billy stabs him. Mm-hmm. He's clearly not dead.
Yeah.
And so he dies. And then Billy gets off the door.
They all run into the kitchen. They've got these little, like, fallback plans. Again, like Home Alone. And they run into the kitchen and they're firing flaming arrows at him with the camp archery kit. And then they lead him upstairs to one of the bedrooms and they're still firing arrows. And
while they're firing arrows, he pulls shelves down on top of Gertie and Nina Dobrev's character.
Yeah.
So they're stuck.
This was another scene that I felt like earned the second half star.
Yes.
Because they were stuck and he's over them and there was so much dread that I was feeling about were one or both of them about to die.
Mm-hmm. And Max and Chris and her mom are all standing over by a window. And her mom has climbed out the window and down the ladder, as was part of the plan. And Max and Chris are about to go, but the girls are trapped under the bookshelf. So they're like, no, we have to help them. And Nina Dobrev's character is like, no, you have to go. Yeah. Just go. And they go. And she holds hands with Gertie.
Who has been stabbed. Because Billy stabs her through the shelf with the machete.
Yeah. So they hold hands. And then Nina Dobrev pulls the other rope. And alcohol, I'm assuming. Some sort of flammable...
Or gasoline,
something flammable falls on him while he's on fire. And it, like, blows up the building.
Somehow.
Yeah. Yes.
So this
horror movie.
Arguably the best scene in the movie. Because Max and Max's mom and boyfriend Chris, they're all on the ground. They're the only 3 left. And the cabin has blown up, essentially.
Yeah.
And Billy is on fire, and he jumps out the window in front of the exploding flames in slow motion.
Well, and as the building is exploding, it's like in slow motion. And the mom says, "What's happening?" And Max says, "Slow motion scene." And then... amazing. And so then he slow motion jumps out, and they all like slow motion start running away, and you can tell the whole time their faces are like, why are we in slow motion?
It lasted the exact perfect amount of time.
It did.
It was on the edge of being too long, but it didn't Family Guy. It didn't push it.
Yes. And we laughed the whole time.
Yeah.
So it was magical. So then they go to jump over a little like stream, and suddenly it's normal speed again.
Yeah, it's like Billy touches one of their feet or something, and him connecting with them pulls them out of slow motion.
Yeah.
So they land in this little river.
He's like coming at them, and she's like, "Mom, tell us the story of Billy." And it like drips them back into the black and white flashback scene. And he's there with them.
Yes.
And it is very confused. So they go through the whole flashback scene again. So as they're standing there, he's standing there, Billy's standing there, and he's all confused. He's looking around, and just then the camp counselors pull up in their car and hit him with their car. And at the same time, there's little letters that say, like,
Summer 1957 or whatever.
And all the letters scatter because they also get hit by the car.
It was
so beautiful. So they go through the whole flashback scene again. When he gets blown up in the outhouse, he runs off, and they're like, "Where's he going?" And they find this abandoned cabin. And the mom's like, "I didn't know that was part of camp." And, you clearly are like, that's where they have to go.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then they're like, "Okay, Mom, end it. And so... she ends the story because they thought maybe he'd get stuck there.
Yeah,
and
he's there. And Billy stabs Chris and carries away the mom. And Max is like, "Oh no, what do I do? Do I help Chris who's been stabbed, or do I get my mom who's getting carried off?" And Chris is like, she's gone, he's taken her.
And so she helps him into an old abandoned church.
Which is there for some reason. Although, when I was a camp counselor, we did have a chapel in the campground.
Yeah.
So that was a thing.
So I guess it depends on the camp.
Yeah, if it's religious or not, I suppose.
Yeah.
The chapel at our camp was where all the camp counselors went to go make out with each other.
Yep. Sounds about right. So they go into this abandoned church, and she's like giving him something to put on his wound, and she's like, "Here, put pressure on it." And then she's like, "I have to go, I have to help her." And he's like, "No, don't leave me, I don't want to die alone." And she's basically just like, "I don't care," and leaves. Not I don't care, but she's just like, "I have to go, I'm so sorry." And she leaves.
Yeah.
Goes chasing after Mom, goes to the abandoned cabin.
Yep.
So this is when
all the lightning
starts. And it was so tedious. So we had to take off a star just for this little 10-minute sequence of nonstop lightning.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just like lightning, wait a little bit, lightning. It was like flash, 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 flash. Like
it was so
craziest
constant.
Lightning storm you've ever seen in your life.
And I'm not sure if they did it because that was a problem with movies in the 80s.
It's not
like
something
bad
I've ever noticed. I know, like in slasher movies, it was always stormy.
Yeah.
And I think always there was lightning. But not that bad. So they must have just kicked it up 10 notches unnecessarily.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that you kind of have to balance, where it's like, all right, we're making fun of this thing, but at this point, are we making our thing less enjoyable because we're so over the top with it?
Right. And this definitely did that. I'm really glad we didn't watch it in a movie theater.
I would have had to leave.
Terribly, terribly sure I would have had a migraine.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was bad. It was just not okay.
Yeah.
So, anywho, through all the lightning, she goes into this abandoned cabin. She sees her mom tied up against a wall. She goes to save her. She has to fight Billy. she gets stabbed. So her mom drags her out, takes her back to the church, and then she's like, I have to finish this. And
her mom figures out, oh, I'm still alive, which means you're not the final girl yet. You won't be the final girl till I'm dead.
So I have to sacrifice myself so you'll be the final girl and you get to go home.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, I wanted you to come with me. Don't leave me, Mom. And she's like, I have to do this for you.
Yeah, because they had this plan that they had cooked up together that Max's mom, who doesn't know she's Max's mom the whole time.
Until the end.
Yeah. Well, does she figure it out at the very beginning?
Well, she calls her mom.
Oh, does she?
Yeah.
Oh. So anyway, they had this whole plot earlier where the mom was going to come back through the screen with them and get to be whatever she wanted instead of being an actress who was trying to break into serious things and couldn't because of the stigma of being in a slasher film. She could go to college or shop at the mall or whatever she wanted to do. It was a little gut-wrenching. They did a really good job setting up their relationship and Max's hopes and like her mom's hopes. It was a very tender moment when her mom was like, no, I'm going to do this.
I have to do this for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she goes out into the middle of the field and starts, like, as she's walking out of the church, Betty Davis Eyes comes on. Yeah. And she starts dancing because if you take your top off, he shows up, right? Like, that's the rule of the movie. So she starts dancing, totally flashes, and gets stabbed.
Yep.
And right before it happens, like, winks at her daughter and, like, waves at her. Like, it was a really cute scene, even though she was taking her clothes off. So, PG-13, you don't have to see anything, which is nice.
Yeah.
So,
not like the multiple numbers of times we had to see full frontal nudity in Dr. Sleep. So
yeah.
That's fun. I guess just once it was seriously full frontal. But anyway, that's
dead lady in a bathtub.
Something that's obviously been bothering me for like 2 weeks.
Yeah. As she gets stabbed, Max gets this, like, renewed sense of superhuman strength and, like, jumps up and is just like, yep, I got this.
Yep. Her battle scene
was incredible.
It felt like Kill Bill. Oh,
yes.
Exactly over the top, down to, at one point, he kicks her and she flies back 30 feet and then does a kitty up to stand up.
Yeah. And he, like, has a knife from somewhere and throws it at her, and she does a, like, slow-mo Matrix style bend over backwards as it flies past her sort of situation.
Yeah.
So that was pretty amazing. And then she stabs him, cuts his head off.
And we should say, it was lightning flashy from the moment that she left Chris alone in the church until the second his head flies off of his body.
And the second his head flies off his body, lightning stops and the sun comes up.
Yeah.
Then the most amazing thing happens. The credits start rolling through the sky and the clouds. And legitimately looks exactly like the credits for The Outsiders. Exactly. Like, color scheme, font, everything. I swear to you. I will have to show you later. It is the same. So, which I think they said this movie was made in 1984. I could be wrong.
Is that when The Outsiders
That's when The Outsiders was made.
Oh, okay.
But it seems like they said, it's 1984. None of us have even thought of yet.
Yeah.
And I was like, ha! I was. So anyway, so the credits roll.
Chris walks out of the church.
Out. They hug each other. They start kissing, obviously. And then it, like, the movie ends. So it's like, you remember old movies where the screen would go blank and then there would just be, like, the rating in the corner? That whole screen comes up. And then they're like, what's happening? And it's like the movie starts kind of freaking out. And they wake up in a hospital.
Yep.
Well, she does. He's kind of asleep in the hospital bed still next to her. So she wakes up in the hospital and she hears her friends talking, and, like, Thomas Middleditch is talking about the pudding.
And how many puddings he's eaten.
Yeah. And she
10.
like opens up the curtain for the hospital room and they're all sitting there and they're like, yeah, we survived. Isn't that cool? And she's like, how? And they're like, I don't know.
But Thomas Middleditch lifts up his shirt and you can see, like,
he's
the
like,
hideous
look at this,
machete.
I got stabbed. And he's like, I'm actually more worried about tetanus. Some doctor did a shoddy job. It's just awful.
So they're sitting there talking.
And they hear
the...
Yeah. And they're like, what's happening? And they look out the hospital room door and they realize they're still in the 80s. Because there's like a Gremlins pot plant holder thing.
A Rubik's Cube.
And
a bottle of, or a can of Tab.
Oh, yes, there's a can of Tab soda.
And they know they're in a horror movie because the doctor is sexually harassing the nurse.
And just right out in the open.
Yeah, she's like, don't you have to do your rounds? And he's like, oh, I'll do your rounds.
Something horrible. And then, like, the creepy music starts, and they turn to their right, and here comes Billy through the hospital door, and Thomas Middleditch excitedly goes, sweet, we're in the sequel!
And the lettering appears in front of Billy that says, Camp Bloodbath 2, Cruel Summer.
Something, yeah. And then the movie ends.
And then they start playing the actual song, Cruel Summer.
And it was amazing.
And they play it over a bunch of bloopers and stuff like that were wonderful.
Because as we said earlier, they kind of let people ad-lib and improvise. So we got to see a lot of the improvise attempts, and they were pretty great. But also, I'm kind of glad they didn't make the final cut, because some of them were terrible.
Yeah.
Or too much, I guess I should say.
Over the top.
Yeah. But anywho, the movie was amazing. We recommend it to all.
Yes. It was fantastic.
So hilarious. Horror comedy. Amazing. Yeah.
But it was written from a very real place. So the guy who wrote it, Joshua John Miller, his dad was Jason Miller, who plays Father Karras in The Exorcist. And so
who had just died
5
years ago. Yeah.
And so
6 years ago, maybe.
Joshua John Miller wrote this while he was coping with that grief of losing his father, who had been an iconic horror film star. And I love that.
So perfect.
Yeah. You can tell that it came from the heart. Mm-hmm. And that it was written by someone with an intimate knowledge of horror movies.
And how it feels to be the child of a horror movie star.
Yeah.
Like, I got that impression anyway, that it felt personal.
So it was fantastic.
It was cool. Yeah.
And the writing was excellent. But I do wonder which lines of dialogue were written and which ones were improvised.
Right?
Especially my favorite little line of Thomas Middleditch's, where when they're first in the movie trying to figure out if it's a dream or not, he's like, okay, but if this is a dream, then my father is about to walk up and he's not going to be wearing any pants and he's going to offer us a slice of pecan pie, but do not eat the pie. It is not pecan pie. And he doesn't explain what it really is. It's just so unsettling.
Like, all the most ridiculous lines. So then my favorite line at the end of the movie is when Max is coming out of the church and she's like, you just effed with the wrong virgin.
But they use their one PG-13 F-bomb in that space.
And it made me, like, spit. It was hilarious.
It was hilarious, and it's such a classic thing with horror movies, too.
They have to have the one-liners.
Yeah. The great one-liner, usually involving the F-bomb, and then back then you could get away with a PG-13 rating if you only said the F-bomb once. Mm-hmm. So you had to use it very strategically.
Yep.
Sometimes it would come out of Molly Ringwald's mouth.
Or it reminds me of, every episode of Buffy. She had to have the one-liner witty zinger, It's pretty great.
So, this was fantastic. I'm so pleased that we spent our evening watching this movie.
Yes, agreed.
It was so good.
It was perfect.
Yeah.
You're perfect.
You're perfect.
So we're perfect together. Sorry, I'll stop singing Wicked. That's not true.
Yeah, that is not true at all. Lies, Jill. Don't make promises you have no intention of keeping.
It's like saying I'll stop quoting John Mulaney.
Never. It's established now. That is a part of the podcast.
Indeed. It's just so easy.
Yeah. So I think we can end this one on a high note. This was a lovely film, and I had a lovely evening.
Indeed.
If you would like to be part of our future lovely evenings, definitely send us your movie requests to screamgirlsquad@gmail.com. If you would like to help us have even more lovely days, you could rate and review us on iTunes. Mm-hmm. It makes a big difference in who gets to discover and listen to our podcast. So 5 stars, please, and thank you. This has been Scream Girl Squad.
Yay!